Good evening. No, hang on. I've made a mistake straight off the back here. It's not evening for you at all, is it, John? What time is it where you are right now?
It's afternoon, about a bit past 1 o'clock.
Well, look, before I get into this, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time out to do this. No expense spent on our side here. I'm talking to you from the back of one of the crew's camper vans here, just beside the checkpoint behind the generator at Hard Rock. And I really appreciate you being patient with me and checking in this afternoon.
Yeah, of course. Looks like you got some luxurious accommodations there.
Yeah, I'm not dissing the camper van at all. This is Tom's from the media team, and it is Switch. We've done all right, but I'm sure that's not what people have come to this video to hear about, unless they're big camper van fans. Um, are you a dog watcher, John? Do you follow the race as well? Do you keep an eye on what's happening over here?
Yeah, I do. From time to time, as they set off in the early morning hours for me, I was still in bed and haven't seen much of this year's race so far, but I do have it pulled up and see some exciting running going on already. You got Irene Kinnigan right there, just neck and neck with Anna Troop's course record pace, and Chris Cope and John Shield have already kind of separated themselves out front for a race on the men's side.
Oh, excellent. And I'm glad you've been paying attention as well, because obviously I brought you here as our expert. People mistake me for an ultra runner sometimes because I'm always hanging around here, but I'm just the bald guy that shouts into the camera. I wanted to speak to somebody that actually knows what these runners at the front end of the big race are going through at the moment. So you mentioned course records there. Um, Tian's course record was super quick. I mean, he was insanely fast. And that trophy icon there on the tracker, that's quite far ahead of John and Chris at the moment. How worrying is that at this stage of the game? It's obviously a very long race, but how big a gap can you reasonably expect to close from here?
Oh, the huge one. I mean, we know. I mean, when you're racing other people, you've always got it in your mind. You could have a high point, they could also have a low point, they could fall apart. So you've always got that in your head. No matter how far behind you get, you have to be thinking, that they could slip up, and you have to be right there to take that opportunity. We do know with the course record that Tia that did not happen with Tia. That trophy icon will not be slipping or falling apart anywhere. Tien is a phenomenal runner who had a phenomenal race, but at the same time, it's a very long race. It's still very early stages. And even someone moving a course record pace, you can close that gap. I kind of, I looking at my pouring through data before this year's winter spine, I was joking with Damien that between Bellingham and Hut 2, I went about 2 or 3 hours faster than him in 2020 than he did on
Wow.
his then men's course record pace. And that's largely because I had the imaginary Jason Cavill chasing me. I didn't know as I was scurrying over the Cheviots that he had unfortunately had to drop. So I had some urgency. I had some strong motivation, and that can be a huge factor in the later stages of these races. So we'll have to see how this race up front plays out. They might push each other to catch that course record icon. They might be motivated themselves to catch the course record icon, although I've got to assume at this point that they're much more interested in racing each other and getting the win than they are the course record.
Yeah, you'd have to think so at this stage. And they're going into actually before I move on to that. What I always find interesting here is from the inside of the race, you must have a very different experience to what we're seeing on the outside. So I'm thinking of this in terms of, you know, are the guys in third place and fourth place and behind now going to be pushing harder to catch up with Chris and John. But of course, at this point, they've really got no way of knowing how big that gap is, right? Unless they're being fed little tidbits of information as they hit a checkpoint. You wouldn't really have any idea.
No, I mean you can ask when you hit checkpoints. Maybe they'll have that info. Maybe they won't. I mean, some of those checkpoints themselves don't have very reliable service. Um, but again, it depends on goals, and especially this early in the race, where people really want to push themselves, how much of a risk they want to take. You know, someone sitting back there could make a push to catch up to those lead two, in the process, put themselves at risk of falling apart, dropping way back, or possibly even DNFing. So I think at this point, you've got to run your own race, be out there and be comfortable with what you're doing, and then uh, get to somewhere around Middleton, and see where things are, see how big that gap is, and kind of decide from there if you want to then start to actually race, rather than just kind of running your own pace out there. It's really, I'd say, between Middleton and Dufton, so somewhere there along the River Tees is where the racing really starts usually.
Yeah, I've heard that reference before, and people at least usually refer to hard draw as, where they really start thinking about racing. Up until here, the first 108 miles in the big race is just about keeping in it, keeping yourself together. This is where they might start pushing and might start making bigger strategic decisions, is the impression I get.
Absolutely, and it's all, there's a lot of mind games out there as well. You've got to be kind of trying to guess what your opponent is doing, in addition to assessing your own goals. Try to assess what their goal is, what they're comfortable doing, and again, like when I raced in 2020, I pushed hard from the start. I went out hard from Edale, and that was kind of my strategy, was to force everyone to go along with me, with the assumption that we would all run out of gas, and I would just run out of gas last. And so that worked effectively that year. But this most recent year, I went out much more conservatively, and was holding back before I sprained my ankle. I was still well back from the leaders, and Jack himself, I don't think actually took the lead until somewhere there along the River Tees, when he pushed off from Damien.
And I mean, in terms of those strategic decisions that they might start making at this part of the race, I'm thinking about sleep now, since we're going into the first night of the race for them. What would a typical sleep strategy for somebody right up at the front be? Are you even thinking about taking a stop for sleep when you get to CP2?
Well, and you see, the summer spine is a bit different than the winter spine, in terms of, I've always considered about 60 hours to kind of be the threshold for me, where I can try to go without sleep. I can at least plan on it, and usually fail. I don't think I've ever quite made it 60 without sleep, but for reference, the five finishers of the Barkley this year, all obviously under 60 hours. I think I was the only one that slept. I got a few good naps, and so, and my Pennine Way record, about 64 hours. I took a couple naps in that. Whereas the spine, the winter
Nap
spine,
in this context.
what was that?
Sorry to interrupt, but what constitutes a nap in this context? Because I know a lot of people listening to
Um,
this won't quite understand what you mean by that.
yeah, I'd say up 15 to 20 minutes tops. I mean, I'm at Barkley. A couple of those I took where I just got to that point where I can't keep my eyes open. It might be 5 minutes that I just hit the ground and kind of let my mind refresh a bit to where I can actually stay on my feet and stay awake. The you know, but the winter spine, once you start pushing up to that 70, 80 hours plus area, which obviously Jack didn't push much above that 70-hour mark. But once you get into that range, you might need some actual sleep, you know, maybe 40 minutes, maybe go a full sleep cycle of an hour and a half, um, and maybe do that 2 nights, like the second and the third night. But on the summer spine, if they're staying anywhere close to Tien's course record here, I would expect they might take 1 or 2 power naps in the 15 to 20-minute range.
So really, asleep in the way that a person on the street like me might be thinking of, it really isn't on the cards. Really, it really isn't on their mind at this point. These are little naps for resetting purposes rather than a sleep strategy as we might think of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to really be, you know, getting cozy and curling up in a bed somewhere. I actually, when it's of when it's something like that, I actually prefer the dirt nap over actually, you know, getting in a bed or a sleeping bag somewhere. Because, you know, if you're only sleeping for 15 minutes, you can double the amount of time you take just by, you know, getting your shoes and some of your kit off, getting into the bed, getting back out, getting your shoes back on, and instead just hit the dirt right there and you're out. And it's quick and it's efficient and it's effective. It's amazing what something like that can do to refresh the mind for a few hours. It doesn't do anything really for your aching legs. It might make those worse. But it's the mind that's important at that point. And a good strategy also is to take a bit of caffeine just before you do that, because it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for that caffeine to kick in. So then right when you wake up, you've got the double boost from the nap and the caffeine taking effect at the same time.
I think I've heard it referred to as the Nappuccino.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about that for the mind. Um, I'm no stranger to sleeplessness, working behind the scenes on this event, but I'm not experiencing it to the same level as the people out on the course. What are the kind of cognitive effects that what 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 lets you know that you are really sleep deprived now, that this is starting to affect you cognitively?
Everyone is a bit different. Um, you know, a lot of people have hallucinations. I've heard some pretty crazy things that people have seen, and they're kind of the persistent thing where they know they're hallucinating. They know that what they're seeing isn't real, but they're still seeing it. I think Jasmine has had a few good ones along those lines. I've never had a persistent hallucination like that. I kind of wish that I would. I feel like it's an experience I'm missing out on here. But what happens to me is I cannot keep my eyes open. I cannot stay awake. I could be, you know, running along, hiking up a hill, and just I'm struggling to stay on my feet and stay upright. And so that's why for me that kind of quick, even just a few minutes of giving into that can really help out. Other people, and this is universal. I think everyone experiences some cognitive decline, some more than others, um, and that's just really kind of your thinking isn't as quick, and you might uh, take a bit longer to remember what you need to do. You might have some confusion on directions, things that would just normally be really simple and easy, and you mess them up. That's almost always an effect of sleep deprivation. And so, you know, in terms of putting things in reference to well-known spine runners, Jasmine, I think, has had the hallucinations. I can't stay awake. I think Damien has trouble navigating at times when he gets extremely sleep deprived. And so everyone is probably a bit of a combination of those things, and some just kind of favor one of those more than the other.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine from the outside that kind of thing until you've experienced it. So I guess anyone who is listening to this and maybe can't relate to that, you're just going to have to come and experience it for yourself. Um, but you mentioned navigation there as being potentially something that gets difficult, and it's definitely something we get asked about quite a lot behind the scenes. Um, Nighttime navigation in particular. How tricky really is it navigating your way up the Pennine Way in race conditions, and particularly in the dark? Is it much harder? And I'm saying this knowing that there are a few people around here, sort of old school people who were used to a map and a compass, who really feel like modern GPS technology must make it really easy to do. And I feel like it can't be that easy.
So, in theory, the Pennine Way is an actual, path that you're following. And so you really shouldn't need GPS. You shouldn't need a map and compass even. You, of course, always want to have a map and compass in case you get off the path. But the Pennine Way is marked in most places. There is a clear path, whether it's the flagstones you're following, or an actual trail, or a trod through a field. Where it gets tricky is some of those fields, especially at night, where you have to, and there's a lot of this going into Middleton. I missed quite a few in 2020 where it's night, and it crosses this field to a stile somewhere on the other side, and you have to angle through that field exactly right on just the right line. If you deviate 5 degrees to either side, then you hit that fence on the other side and you go, where's the stile? Which way do I go? What do I do now? And you're looking up and down the fence with your headlamp or your torch, and you might not be able to pick it out. And so you wander one way, you can't find it. You wander the other way, try to find it. And so that's the trickiest part, really, of navigating on the spine. I will say, um, this isn't something that they have to worry about in summer spine, but going over Crossfell, if it's covered in snow, going over the Cheviots if they're covered in snow, then obviously that nice path to follow there isn't going to be as easy. But the Crossfell can still be a little bit tricky going up it. But yeah, for the most part, it is going through those fields and hitting the stile right at night. That's the toughest part.
Yeah, I have heard a lot of runners swearing about the endless stiles and fences in some stretches of the race. And I think there's
and that, just to add to that, that's where GPS really doesn't help much, because GPS, the actual track that you have is not accurate down to the meter. The whatever device you're using to follow it is not accurate down to the meter. And if you're to the left or the right just a little bit, it's at night. It's quite easy to not be able to find that stile or the gate.
well, fingers crossed for our athletes out there at the moment. They managed to get the navigation right overnight tonight. It's getting very dreary out there, very low cloud, and they are going to get some poor visibility on the higher ground. So it really might be a factor in the hours coming up. Now, of the sections that they've still got to cover, what do you think is the hardest section of the Pennine? Right. What was the toughest stretch of it for you?
Blenkinsop and Squate More for me. I don't know how it is uh in this right now. I don't know what the conditions have been, but going down off from Tan Hill Inn, I mean that can effectively be a nautical route at times. It's got the little posts sticking up like they're navigational buoys in a river. Um, maybe it's dry. I don't know, but that's a tricky part. And then going over Crossfell and the Cheviots are you know they're tough in terms of terrain. The Pennine Way really isn't a mountainous uh, course. It's you know there are a few decent climbs on it, but of those, the Crossfell and the Cheviots are the most challenging, especially when you first enter the Cheviots. You've got that steep climb. It can be muddy. You're getting battered by wind as soon as you get to the top. And it's kind of in that tricky spot where you're almost to the finish, but not quite close enough to have that adrenaline rush pulling you towards it. So that's always a big challenge.
Well, thanks for that. Much appreciated. I can guarantee you it is not dry there at the moment. We've had some torrential rain over the last few days. So, yeah, if any of the runners in the event are somehow listening to this, you've got that to look forward to. And look, John, I just want to say thank you very much for this. I feel like I've kept you long enough. This was meant to be a really short call, but thanks for talking us through what we can expect out there on the course from the runners. And yeah, just thanks for taking the time to chat to me this evening.
Yeah, thanks so much. All the best to the runners out there, and I look forward to following along.